Hi BookTube, welcome to Jackie's Literary Corner. I am Jackie, and it is time for a review. I debated about doing a review of this, but because first of all, I don't want to do too many standalone reviews because I still want to do a wrap up at the end of February, and also I've been kind of struggling with my reviewing skills and feeling like my reviews are not that great. Um, but I'm going to try it anyway. I just need to practice. I think practice is one of the big things that helps people get better at something. So this book, the book I'm going to review, I don't have a copy of because I listened to it on audiobook on my iBook via my phone, so I do not have a copy in my possession. So technically I own the book. I don't have a physical copy though. And that is Plain Bad Heroines by Emily M. Danforth. And I don't know if you would call this I guess you would call this literary. But there is things like there's romance in the story, it is historical and for half the story. And it's a drama. So I don't know what genre I would classify this as. I guess also it kind of has a horror element too, like a supernatural element, like a possibility. It's one of those books that where there's a possibility of supernatural, but we're not 100% sure, and there's no like straight answer that says that there's a supernatural element to it. So, Plain Bad Heroines has two timelines. Like I said, half the story is historical. It takes place in modern day, but it also takes place in the early 1900s. And we have the 1900 storyline is focused on these two women who are lovers. So it is a queer romance, or the technical term is sapphic, I believe. Between Libby, whose last name I do not remember, and Alexandra. And Libby is headmistress to an all-girls school called Brookhaunts that was created by her husband, her much older husband who has died. And this is the only way she and her lover, Alex, can be together. She is the headmistress and Alex is one of the teachers at this all-girls school. And you actually find out later that Libby, when Alex was not present in her life, she had hooked up with a man. So I'm guessing she would be technically bi, because she has slept with men before, and got pregnant. And Mr. Brookhaunts, whose first name I don't remember, let's just call him Mr. Brookhaunts, him and his psychic as in not psychic as in partner in crime, but as in woman psychic as in mind reading and seeing the future and all that stuff, find out that she is pregnant and offer her to marry Mr. Brookhaunts, and Alex can go with her. So they are running the school, and while they're there, this book comes into their life. This mysterious book written by this woman named Mary McLean. And this book has seemed to have a powerful influence on the young women. And this girl is like she's a rebel against society. She's this young teenage girl who did not follow society's rules and whatnot. And all these girls consider themselves her followers, and this book causes a lot of disruption in their lives, and it results in one of the students dying, her and her own lover, her own girlfriend dying while trying to trick her cousin and to punish her male cousin who was into her and everything. And this results in the school and Libby and Alexandra's lives and their relationships slowly falling apart. and eventually the school doesn't falls the whole like the school no longer, so in the present day the school no longer or the building is still there, but it's not in working, it's not open. And so in the modern storyline you have this, there was a young woman, Merritt Emmons, who would liked a young writer who wrote a book about the school and the history of it, and it caught the attention of a horror filmmaker, Bo, whose last name I do not remember. I'm not good with remembering last names all the time. And he decides to hire Hollywood it girl and Instagram influencer Harper, and there's a whole reason why her name is Harper, and there's a whole story behind why she has two, her first name and last name are the same. And he also hires the child star Audrey Wells, whose mother was famous for her own movie franchise, to also play in the movie, to play the girls that, and I believe to play the girls that died. And so it looks at this whole, and like all of a sudden like things start, we get the whole movie making the audition and everything, the movie making process, but when they finally get to the site of the school, weird things start happening at the school. But each one of our girls, our modern, Harper, Audrey, and Mare, each individually know that Bo has intentions to not just do a historical horror drama, but that he kind of wants to do a documentary type story, like the Blair Witch, kind of like in the style of Blair Witch Project. So he believes that the site is haunted, and he also wants to make sure that something actually happens. So these girls like don't know all of a sudden the lines blur between reality and fiction, and they don't know if some of the weird stuff that's happening is just Bo and his team setting up things, or if there really is something spooky going on at this school. So first of all, I would recommend. One of the biggest criticism and complaints I've heard is that the book is just too long-winded. It's like they could cut it down a lot. Now I didn't read the physical copy, so if you like it but it's just too long to read, then I would recommend listening to audiobook, because I think the audiobook really helps. And of course you can also change the time with the audiobook so you can speed it up. And I also like the narrator. She has a very calming, soothing voice, and she gives personalities to each of the characters and individual voices to each of them, which I really enjoyed. And I do think it's kind of hard to be an audiobook narrator, because unless you have a full cast, it's just you. And not everybody's that talented to where they can make different types of voices sound completely different from their own. And, granted, she was not the narrator from this book was not perfect. Like, she didn't change her voice, she couldn't change her voice completely, but I think it was still pretty good. She was still a good narrator. And like I said, I think this really helps if you think the book is too long, but you're still interested in the story. I kept going back and forth on which story I was more interested in. Because at first I liked the historical fiction part of the story more, but then I kind of was intrigued by what was going on in the contemporary storyline, and I liked there's a romance that develops between Harper and Merritt, and it looks at what happens. It kind of is a way to look at what happens when when you're a regular person that's not like famous, and you're dating someone that is, and how hard that is and how uncomfortable that can be, especially in this age of social media and all these social networks where everyone is online and you can easily pass judgments on people. Like well, first of all, like Harper, you have this, like, Merritt is not skinny. She's a big girl. And people make comments about that, and recall when they find out, when they catch Merritt and Harper going on a date and they share their first kiss, everyone provides comments of, oh, she's ugly, you can't, why are you dating her, you could date me. And she even is approached by this other woman who flirts with her. And of course, Harper is used to this, and she has to put on this persona, so she kind of is very nice to people. She's not she's not off-putting at all. She's nice and polite and flirts and, you know, teases people. And there's a scene where there's some fans that stalk them and follow her to the set of their movie, and it just makes a very uncomfortable. And of course, Audrey is a child star, but she's not as famous as Harper is. So it makes it also uncomfortable for her as well. So I thought that part of the story was kind of interesting to look at. And like I said, I also liked, and like I said, I liked how, you know, there's a blurred line between fantasy, like if they are really being haunted, if the place is really haunted, or if it's just the director Bo and, like I said, his team doing things, because they told each girl separately, claiming the others didn't know that they used to have cameras and there were going to be some weird things happening. Even though Bo does, he claims he does believe that it's haunted. But of course, when you can't control, if there is a real haunting, if haunting stuff happens, you can't control ghosts. You can't control, like, things that you can't control. Things are going to happen. It doesn't, you know, I don't think the spirit world would work like that, whether it's real or not. So I thought, so like I said, I thought that part was interesting, like the idea of, is it real? Is something really going on? Although I do have mixed feelings in those kinds of stories where it's like, is it really supernatural or is the person just crazy? That kind of bugs me, because I'm more like the idea of it being confirmed as supernatural, like, because I love, you know, the subgenre of fantasy, which is all the supernatural, like paranormal stuff, like ghosts and, you know, that kind of stuff. That's one of my favorite subgenres of, I love anything fantasy, really. So, except for fantasy where romance is a heavy focus. I'm iffy about that. Even though I will defend YA books for having romance in all their books. People, YA authors putting romance in there because they do like romance. Just sometimes it can be too much, and if it takes away from more important aspects of the story, or at least what I consider more important. But in this case, it worked for me. The romance aspects worked for me. But I also like the historical and the whole idea of the complicated relationship that Alex and Libby have. And I also thought it was kind of funny that, like, we go back a little farther to when they first met in their college days, and the whole idea of, like, they call Alex the Flirt. That was her nickname. Yet there are times when Libby flirts, not in a mean or spiteful way, or not in a, like, oh, I know I'm flirting, and I'm not in doing it on purpose kind of way, but she has more of a romantic history than Libby does. I mean than Alex does. So when I was reading it, I thought that Libby was more of the flirt than Alex. But that was, seeing their dynamic was very interesting. I mean, very intriguing, and I definitely felt pity for both of them. There were times I was more on Alex's side, but then there were times where when we were in Libby's point of view, I was on her side. I kind of understood where she was coming from, just as I understood where Alex was coming from, and their frustration with each other, and their concern and their doubts, because Alex slowly kind of goes a little, the point she comes off as a little, like, crazy or a little delusional to everybody else. And it's like, is she really? Or maybe these people don't have the whole story. Or maybe Libby doesn't want to admit that Alex has a point about her, and, like, she's in denial with her own issues. Like, I think that was part of it as well. And of course, we also had to deal with the fact that, like I said, they had to hide their relationship by, going away to this place where they were kind of isolated. And because Libby, of course, made the, mistake of having sex and getting pregnant, it was worse because she had to hide her pregnancy. So she was given an offer to help her do that. And the offer was very tempting, and she took it. She took the offer, and you can't really blame her for that. For the situation she was in. She was desperate, and she knew people would judge her. So not only would she be judged for being a queer woman, but also of getting pregnant in a wedlock. She would be told to marry this guy. And she didn't want to be, not only did she have no interest in the guy, she just said, but also she wasn't in love with him. She didn't want to have his child. She didn't want to be a mother at all. And of course, back then it's even more judged because it's expected of you. While today, at least you can, people will still judge you, but it's, and women will, in fact, I'm reading listening to another audiobook that kind of also talks about this for other reasons, a nonfiction, about how one of the chapters talks about how people, like, when you say you're not interested or you're single, people will make it a big deal and be like, oh, don't worry, you'll find someone. Or, oh, I feel so bad for you. They automatically assume you want to get married and want to have kids and stuff. And so I imagine even back then in the 1900s it was even worse. Because, like I said, at least today in modern times, we're not obligated. People will judge us silently, but we're not going to be punished for it. The most punishment we'll get is being judged, which can be bad. I mean, obviously is bad. But compared to history. And I thought the romance at first was really sweet until it started to fall apart. I thought they were really cute together, And when they meet, Libby does this little performance for Alex, and talking about all her conquest, but not in a bad way, in a cute kind of fun way. And then by the end of the song, she's like, now it's my turn. Let's see if, and she pretends to be the goddess Nike. She's cosplaying as the goddess Nike. And now let's see if you can seduce Nike. And it's a cute scene. Although I was worried when I was listening to it. When I got to that part, I was worried that Alice would be someone who would get mad about someone embarrassing them in front of everybody. But I loved their meet cute, basically. I thought it was really sweet and really cute. Which, that's meet cute. And also, like, the sense of dread, the slow build-up of the sense of dread, this tension, like, and like I said, with Alex, you didn't know if it was in her head or not. Like, if she was just imagining these girls judging her, or, Libby taking a side and it's not hers. Like, you don't know if she's crazy and delusional or if there really is something going on. And all this leads to this book of someone who questions society's rules, which is funny because later, later in the storyline, you meet there's a character that the book is still around, and there's a character who's like reading the book and is like, and it's a little earlier in a different time, a little bit like 10 years later or something, and times of course are changing, and people, and this other character is like, I don't see what the big deal is about the book. How does it have such a powerful impact on people? It's such a powerful influence on people, and people hate it so much or people love it so much. It's just a book about some, teenage girl who's, rebelling against society, It's like, what's the big deal? And so it was very interesting comparing everyone's action early in the story to this one character's reaction to the book and being like, whatever about it. Like, thinking, maybe it's good, it's a good read, but it's not as, I don't understand why it has such a powerful impact on people and why people have such strong feelings about the book. Just the book. Um, and I imagine like booktubers could probably relate to that idea of them caring so much about a book, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, and feeling such a strong connection to it that another person looking at it and be like, okay, it's good, it's entertaining, but why do you love it so much? I mean, what's the big deal about it? Um, it's all about perspective and who, and how, if this person relates to that book or not, how they feel about it, and how society reacts to this book. And it's interesting that it was. Oh, sorry, I keep thinking about now ever since I watched Gunpowder Fiction Plots video where they were talking about reviewing, and someone had said how people use the word interesting a lot. It's like our default word for describing if why we like some or we're intrigued by a book. But whether we can't think of any other word, I can't think of any word other than interesting. I don't know what else to say. What other word to use? So it's funny that I think about that so much now, all the time now, when in the last few reviews I've done. But anyway, so, and then we also have another in the contemporary storyline. We also have how it looks at the whole idea of, I feel like it also looks at the pressures of Hollywood and how all three of our plain bad heroines in the present day dealing with the idea of, like these pressures, like when they all find out about the movie and what Bo really intends to do for the movie, it's like it calls into question their morals and should they stick to their principles and their morals. And Mara does try to, but then she's persuaded otherwise. It really looks at do you compromise your morals and your principles for a career or not? Is it worth it? And how hard it is to decide to be a moral person or, stick to your principles, or do you compromise that? And it's like, some people look at that as, it's really not that bad, this is just for fun and it's not that big of a deal. You have to decide, is this worth sacrificing your beliefs? And it calls into question that with this particular movie, because it's exploiting them in a way, in my personal opinion. That's what I thought as I was listening to this book, that it was exploiting them. And Bo was lying to all three of these girls. He told each of them, "Oh, I told you, but I didn't tell the other two." So they don't know because I want the reactions to be authentic. And it just felt kind of icky. But then again, that's Hollywood. I'm not part of Hollywood, but I do have some idea of how Hollywood works. I think most people do. That Hollywood is full of, there's a sense of ickiness because you have to, make these sacrifices to be famous. And you can kind of understand both Audrey and Harper. They're actresses, they want to succeed. Harper is the Hollywood it girl right now of her generation. And it's like, she could easily lose it. People are mean. People can be very mean and tear you down, and you can lose it just like that. And she sees this movie as an opportunity to continue her status, and, when you can't, like, we all deep down want to be liked. None of us want to be popular, but a lot of, when it's dangled in front of us, we might be very tempted. So it's like, does she keep, her career? This is her career. And since she's been doing it longer and has become very famous over the years now, she's more willing to sacrifice it, to stick with this. She's like, oh, that's just how Hollywood is. That's just how it works. She keeps making excuses for it. And then you have Audrey, she's kind of leaning towards it, but she's also hesitant. Because she's not a Hollywood it girl. She's not an Instagram influencer. She's not part of that scene as much as Harper is, because she was just a child star. She's not as known anymore, and she's done a lot of indie films. But this is her chance to get status, to be known, to maybe get better films. So again, you can't blame her, but she has more hesitancy than Harper. She's more reluctant. While Merritt is not even part of the Hollywood scene, but she has her, wants to be an author and wants to be a famous author. I mean, who wouldn't want to be? So there's her struggle to be like, do I do I make she's the one that sticks to her principles for the longest until she's persuaded. And she actually kind of has a connection. It's not just because she wrote a book about Brooke Hauntz, but also she is friends with the woman, the last remaining heir of the Brooke Hauntz estate. She's has a friendship with her, and this woman wants to protect her family's legacy. So they often, in both this woman and her mom, feel like Merritt doesn't take enough chances. And they also can tell that Merritt likes Harper, so they feel like Merritt is too cautious, so they persuade her to give it another shot, to just, be like, well, this is your chance. Maybe there's some questions, maybe there's things that are not entirely right, but it's like, think of it, it might be worth it in the end. So I enjoy the idea of how it looks at that as well. Now, again, like a lot of people, the book is long, so there are stuff in there that they probably didn't necessarily need to include. Emily Danforth did not need to include. There is a lot of stuff that she probably could have taken out, but I think, again, what helped me is listening to it on audiobook, so I didn't notice that thing and that kind of stuff. And I think why I was still intrigued by the contemporary stuff is because for years I've always watched the E channel where they do entertainment news and Hollywood gossip. I've been entertained. I used to watch it a lot. So I think that's also partly why I'm kind of into this, and I'm interested in this kind of stuff. I'm into that part of the story. Why, part of me was like, kept going back and forth between the historical and then that part of the story. As well. So I had a good time with this. It was a very engaging story. Try not to use the I word. Engaging and kind of fun, and there was some slow tension, and like I said, I liked how you don't know if there's something supernatural going on or not. Like I said, a lot of times I prefer when paranormal stuff is actually literally happening, when it's called into question. But it kind of added to the mystery of it all as well. Like, it does add to the mystery in stories when you don't know if it's supernatural or not. And it keeps you wanting to read, keeps you wanting more. Wanting to know, is there something really going on, or is in their imagination? And also, of course, you want to know, is this movie going to work out? Are they going to finish filming it? What's going to happen? Because I think the other thing why the last remaining heir and Merritt wanted this out there and was willing to make this a film and sacrifice their principles in a way was because it got it noticed. It got the story out there. So it kind of reflects the Me Too movement in the real world outside the story. And there's also a plot of the story that is revealed later that is a very Me Too plot, like a woman experiencing injustice in the world because of these two brothers that are mentioned throughout the book. So that is my thoughts on Plain Bad Heroines. I really like this book. I had a good time with it. Like I said, audiobook, probably, unless you don't mind a super long book with a lot. I'm sure there are people that actually were okay with this, but I saw a lot of people critiquing it, saying it was too long-winded. But anyway, so I hope you guys like this video, liked hearing my thoughts on this book. Maybe it will persuade you to read the book, or maybe not. But if you like this video, be sure to give a thumbs up, click subscribe if you haven't already, click the bell notification if you want to be notified when I post new videos. And I will talk to you all later. Alright, bye!